let's first talk about some of your early professional career, starting with when you became a White House Fellow, working under the Honorable Secretary of State Colin Powell. And tell us about how that experience, what was that like, and how did that help launch your eventual trajectory?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First, let me tell you, I am so happy to be back at this conference, at this event. I was talking to Luis Rosero, who's on our team, earlier today, and I said, gosh, remind me again, when did I do this program? Like 5-6 years ago? He's like, 13 years ago. So, I think time is flying and we're all getting a little older, but I'm just so excited. So thank you for the invitation to be back. And, that program was such a great experience for me, and I'm happy to talk about it later on if that's of interest. I was fortunate to do this program, the White House Fellows Program. For those of you that don't know about it, please take note, particularly some of the young folks and the young corporate achiever. This is, I think, one of the least known, but I think best leadership training programs in the country. It's a program that selects 10 to 15 young professionals from different walks of life every year. It's bipartisan, it's nonpartisan, to work as one of the special assistants to one of the cabinet secretaries. And I had the privilege when I was selected to be appointed to work for then Secretary of State Colin Powell. For me, more than anything, it was really two great things. One was, it was a great opportunity to work for someone who I think is one of the great leaders, business, private sector, public sector of our generation, and see General Powell sort of up front, his values, his character, and his management style. So that was great. And I think the second thing that was great for me is I'm a private sector person, always have been. And for me to get some exposure as to how the private sector and how government work together was a big insight. And so it was a great opportunity. It also taught me that, particularly when you're earlier on in your career, it's important to invest in yourself. A lot of people told me when I decided to leave corporate America to do the fellowship, they said, gosh, you're taking yourself out of the rat race. That's not really a smart thing to do. And sometimes it took me a little bit to explain to people why I did it. But in retrospect, it's probably the best investment of a year of time that I did in myself. When you think of your career, not as a short term, but you think of it over as a marathon. And so I encourage people early on in their career, make sure you invest in yourself and continue sort of stretching yourself, because those are good experiences.
That's great. So before you were a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, you were an HACR Young Hispanic Corporate Achiever. Tell us about that experience and what message would you have? We have our 2019 Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers here in the audience. What's your message for our young? Where are you, Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers? Yeah.
There you are, all right. Oh wow, I can tell they gave you the good seats, huh? Look, for me, Cid, it was great. It's hard to believe that it was 12, 13 years ago. And you were telling me today it was the first class?
This is you were the first class.
You were the first class.
Yes.
So look, it was great for me. I think what I took away from it was, I think, a fewfold. One is, this concept of investing in oneself and make sure you're exposing yourself to different management lessons and perspectives and the like, I think was important. That experience gave me that. I think the second of, networking and meeting a lot of peers within one's group, I thought was really important to me. I made a lot of friends there, friends that I still have today. And I think, the third thing is, getting to be at these symposiums and hearing from Latino and non-Latino leaders about their respective careers and sort of what worked for them, what lessons they had, the good and the bad as they went through their careers, to me was extraordinarily helpful. And I've tried in different ways to do that throughout my career. I'm so excited for the 40 plus individuals that are doing it. And at the end of the day, I think that program, particularly as we've seen the Latino community expand over the last 12, 13 years, we're 60 plus million strong, 18% of the population here in the States, as we all know. Our leaders, not of the Latino community, our leaders of the United States are going to come out of our community. So the more we can do to make sure that we support them and nurture them and accelerate their growth, I think we're all going to benefit from it. So congratulations to you all.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. So let's talk about what about your leadership, as well as who inspires you, and do you have mentors? And talk to us about who's your role models that you've been able to use to emulate to help you rise up to where you are today.
Yeah. I think like a lot of us, I don't have one mentor or one role model. I had so many people throughout my career. I was very fortunate that took time to give me good advice, and I certainly wouldn't be here without that good advice and support. I'd highlight one or two sort of buckets. First, I always say this. My most important and first mentors were our parents. My parents are immigrants, like so many millions from our community across the country. My mom from Cuba, my dad from Peru. And I think they instilled in me and my two younger brothers, one who's here with me today, who's an attorney here at Greenberg Traurig. I think they instilled great values in us early on, that immigrant mentality, that the most important thing, the one thing in the world that no one could ever take away from you was an education. And they instilled that value in us very early on. And so that was extraordinarily helpful. And obviously the values and the like that go with it. I think the second, and you touched on it a little bit, was General Powell. And again, regardless of whether he was in the public or private sector, what I loved seeing and learning from him was his ability to communicate to all parts of his organization. And the lesson I really took from him was, it was great if you were working in a particular industry and you had a job and you had a strategy, but if you weren't able to effectively communicate that, what you were trying to get done, and then bring other people along with you in that effort, there's only so much impact you were going to have. And so the big lesson for me from my experience with General Powell was perfecting, refining one's communication skills in small groups and larger groups, so that you could be very clear as to what you're trying to get done, and hopefully people will be supportive and you can come together. That's when you can make mass impact. That's when you can have real scalable impact. And so that was another big lesson for me.
That's great. So let's talk about NBCUniversal Telemundo. So you joined the company, and as soon as that happens, a lot of changes had happened. Tell us about your reaction on that day in 2016, if I'm correct, when you got the big news.
I got the big news about
the ratings.
About the ratings. Well, we were look. It's one of those lessons in life. People say it takes a village to get important things done, and this was no exception. When we started the project a few years ago at Telemundo Enterprises, we said, gosh, we have this great opportunity in that we've been given an incredible platform, but we want to do something special. We want to do something that's never been done. And so we set what we thought was a very ambitious goal, and said, you know what? Yes, we would like to be the top-rated Hispanic network in the country, something that had never happened in Telemundo's history, 30-plus years that Nielsen's been rating here in the United States. But more importantly, we said, it's not just about doing that. We want to do something that redefines Hispanic media, because we want to elevate and diversify the type of content that's being offered to the Latinos here in the United States. And so with that ambition and that goal, we set out to A, start building the team that had the skill set to be able to do that. B, convincing our corporate company, Comcast NBCUniversal, to make an investment because our community was worth it. And then 3, executing on that goal. And so, 3 years, 2.5 years from announcing that goal, we were very proud to have hit that milestone. But what I'm more proud about is that this is a team that's been able to replicate it 2 years in a row now. And we're well on our way to hopefully doing a three-peat. And so I think it's a great lesson that if you can communicate a very clear message or ambition, build the right team and get the right resources, and then focus on execution, you can have sustainable success. It's not a sort of a one-trick pony. It's sustainable. And so it's been a lot of fun, and we still have a lot of work to do, but we're on a good trajectory.
That's great. Now, with the platform that you've created and expanded, you're doing a lot in the Hispanic community, and I know one of them that you're making a big push is the 2020 census. Talk to us about the Telemundo initiative to have our community counted in the 2020 census.
Sure. Well, I think everyone, hopefully everyone in this room knows how important the 2020 census is, period. It is particularly important for our community. Billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding get allocated to local municipalities, states, and the like for services and and the like. And so it's extraordinarily important for our community. We, Telemundo, in March announced our community empowerment initiative called Hazte Contar, or Be Counted, under our community empowerment platform of El Poder en Ti. And our objective really with this initiative of Hazte Contar is to make sure that our community, one, participates in the 2020 census, understands the benefits, understands why they should be participating in it. But then sort of on a broader basis, we also want to increase civic engagement. We have the incredible I think benefit here in the United States. We have so many amazing community organizations that are doing great work on the front lines. We, Telemundo, with our work, we're really trying to support them, shine a light on those community organizations, many who are our partners, and make sure that, and we deliver for the Latinos here in the United States.
That's great. And in addition to that, we know that you'll be one of the first networks to broadcast the upcoming primary debates. And so that's a big push, which I think is coming up. I think you're planning it in June, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so
we're very excited about that. There's big election coming up in 2020, and we were very proactive and aggressive because we have seen an increase, obviously, over the last decade of participation and the importance of Latinos. We do think we are reaching a tipping point. And so we've been very proactive in saying that the Latino community should have a seat at the table when we begin this process. And so as the DNC, as many of you know, the two parties, the RNC and the DNC, manage or sanction their respective primary processes. The RNC with the sitting president will likely not have one. The DNC has sanctioned 12 debates that'll happen in advance of the 2020 election. The first one, which is really the one that you want to get because there's so much interest and pent-up demand. And there was a big competitive process, and I'm very proud of our NBCUniversal team. We were awarded the first one, which is going to be on June 26th and 27th of this year. So it's going to be a long road here till November of 2020. They awarded it to NBCUniversal, and it's a very unique debate. First, it's going to be held right here in Miami. So we're very excited about that. But second is we're going to be broadcasting it live on 3 of our platforms. So on Telemundo, on NBC, and on MSNBC, all at the same time. It is 2 nights to make sure that we can have space for all 20 candidates that will qualify. And it's a historic night because it's the first time that a Spanish language network is co-hosting the first debate in a presidential cycle. And I think that speaks to the importance of our community.
Very, very historic. Yeah, kudos to you and the Telemundo and NBCUniversal team. That's great. And then, of course, you've made a real big push in deportes, in sports. The World Cup, and I think the Women's World Cup is coming, and so that's been a real big investment that Telemundo's been making in sports. Tell us about the strategy to increase your presence in these major global sporting events.
Sure. Well, the media landscape, as consumers, you all know this, has undergone transformational change over the last 10 years. I think we've seen that change accelerate even in the last 2 to 3 years, and that change is going to continue. And I think one of the things that we have seen is that live sports, among other things, live news and other things still work very well, but live sports is an important one. And so a few years ago, we made the decision to go out and compete, and fortunately we won the rights to the biggest sporting event on the planet, which is the World Cup. So this past summer, we held the first ever World Cup that we oversaw. It was the Men's World Cup in Russia. We have the rights through 2026, which is the first time that the World Cup will be coming back to the United States. So we're very excited about that. This summer, well, with that contract, we bring a lot of other tournaments. So this summer, we're going to be hosting the Women's World Cup, and it's going to be held in France, and we're extraordinarily excited. We've seen such a growth of the sport here in the United States. One of the primary focus for us at Telemundo has been to lean into a lot of our initiatives when it comes to women empowerment and female empowerment. So we're really excited. We're making a big deal about this Women's World Cup, and we're all super supportive of Team USA. I think we're going to be able to do some special things in France.
That's excellent. This is great. So let's pivot for a moment, real quickly, to to your success that has led you to get on a couple of corporate boards. And we had our executive programs over the weekend, and we have our symposium, and we had a great session earlier this morning with our Alliance for Board Diversity members. You serve on the Walmart board as well as the PepsiCo board of directors, and so tell us about why it's so important, not only for corporate America to have diversity on its corporate boards, but tell us about your experience on serving on corporate boards as well.
Sure. Well, look, it's a tremendous privilege and honor for me to be on both of those boards. I think they're incredible companies, not only American companies, but global companies. Why do I think Fortune 500 companies need to be focusing on, at the risk of stating the obvious to everyone in this room, but it's important we say this, right? We always say this, the financial and economic success of the United States is directly linked to the success of the Latino community. We are the demographic that's driving all of the growth here in the United States, but we've become more than a demographic story because we've read about it for so long that, yes, there's a lot of numbers, 60 million strong. We've become a force that is having social, cultural, but most importantly, economic impact. If you were to take today the Latino community as a standalone country, we would be the 7th largest GDP in the entire world, ahead of countries like Italy and Russia and others, and India, that you always read about as huge economies. We have that right here in our backyard. And any Fortune 500 company that takes a real look at their business, whatever products and services that they're trying to sell, the overwhelming amount of their growth is coming from our community. And so I and so many others are big believers, but it's just good practice. You need to ensure that you have diverse voices at the table, certainly in boards, but equally important in management positions, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because it's good business.
Right.
And so I take my hat off clearly to Walmart and PepsiCo, but so many other companies that are recognizing that. Having said that, I still think corporate America is still way behind as to where they need to be. We're still in the single digits as it pertains to percent of Hispanics on corporate boards. And when you take into account, again, we're 18% of the population, there's no reason why we should have one Latino on some of these boards. We should have multiple, as well as other minority communities represented. So we're making a lot of progress. There's companies that have really stepped up. There's more work to be done.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and that's really important. And I know that part of the pipeline is getting involved on some of these very prominent nonprofit boards. And of course, you're on the Aspen Institute board, and so talk to us, about balancing your time between your leading at Telemundo as well as being on these boards, and then still finding time to serve on a great institution like the Aspen Institute.
Yeah, I'd say a few things. One is the folks that serve on these boards, I always break them out into two simple buckets. One is a lot of these boards are made up of individuals that are in sort of the latter part of their career. So either they are about to retire or they have retired as far as their daily jobs. And then there's some folks in the bucket that I put myself in. I'm a working man. I have a day job. And so, when you also overlay the number of Hispanics or Latinos or minority community executives who are in the first bucket, we're still coming through the ranks, so there's not as many as there should be. So the lion's share is in the second bucket that are participating. And why do I say that's important? Because I think balancing career with extracurricular activities is important. I always tell people, and I try to keep this true to myself, my first priority is my day job. right? You know, we need to produce, we need to perform, and that's my first responsibility. Having said that, it is important as a leader in a respective business when you get that opportunity to step up and make the time. One, because I think it's good, one grows as an executive, you get exposed to different things, but second, and most importantly, you're able to make a contribution into those companies to really ensure that they're seeing the opportunity that exists for them here in the United States when it relates to some of these communities that haven't been represented in the past.
That's great. So I'm going to ask you one last question. This is a question I ask all the speakers, and I'm going to ask it maybe in a different way. You know, imagine Cesar Conde, you're 80 years old, and you're looking back at your career. How do you want to define your legacy? You know, what will be the legacy of Cesar Conde in the years to come?
You know, look, I hopefully we still have a long way to go. You know,
yes.
You know, I'd say two things, Sid. I think first is you definitely want to be known as, and I'd like to be known. I think as a lot of us, as you were able to have impact beyond oneself. In other words, you know, it's nice to be successful, but it's important to have significance. One of the punchlines or one of the taglines of some of the programs of the Aspen Institute is, how do you go from success to significance? And you know, our parents taught us great values in that it was important to make sure that you were successful in your respective career, but equally, if not more important, it was that you had to make sure that you shared some of those lessons, not only for your younger siblings, but for the generations that are coming behind you. So for me, that would be one of the most important things, and you know, history will be the judge of that.